There it is, Ben.
That's the
It's
book.
the things we do when we're in isolation. Hey, to start video. Hey, folks, I'm Bryce Holdaway. He is Ben Kingsley. We are the co-hosts of the Property Couch. We're also the authors, Ben, of a
Authors.
couple of books, and this is the first one that we wrote. And so today is chapter 3 on how to retire on $2,000 a week. Because we did the armchair guide to property investing, we thought whilst we're in isolation, Ben, we thought we would talk about the chapter highlights of our book. Now, in the first one we did, Ben, in chapter 1, we
Yes.
talked about building the knowledge base,
Love
which
it.
was a lot of fun around attitudes. Chapter 2 was about the psychology of investing, Ben, and that's where we went through the analogy of the digger,
Yep. The
the
levers.
levers,
Yes.
time, target, income. But Ben, chapter 3 is the 5 essential steps
To
on how to
start.
start.
Right.
Which now, Ben, if we want to borrow a sporting analogy, if they say that the third quarter is the premiership quarter, I've got to
Yep.
say that this chapter here does a lot of heavy lifting because there are some very, very, very meaty concepts in this chapter, isn't there?
There's some huge concepts. The first one is a very powerful one, which is effectively our five-step process, and then there's the money smarts. Which, because remember, Bryce, we did this book before we did the best-selling second book, which is the Make Money Simple Again, and we
That's
were
right.
talking about money smarts. So we'll get to that in a minute. But we've got the 5 steps. What else have we got in there?
Mate, we've got the 5 steps. We've also got, we touch on Money Smart, put a diagram in here around Money Smart. So I'll
Yep.
give you a look at that, folks, just here around how to set up your Money Smarts. Not only that, Ben, we then go through and we talk about, this is amazing because we show people who the industry players are.
Yes.
So there's a bit to go here, but let's talk about the 5 steps, Ben, because when we first met each other, we were talking about the fact that property investing is a process, not an event. But our observation was that a lot of people saw it as an event, which
Yes.
typically started with them trawling on the internet, Ben, and starting at what we'll talk about shortly at step 4, which is the implementation. But they just go on the internet and they would look for properties and really start at the bricks and mortar. And we thought, wow, and remember this book's approaching 6 years old, Ben, since we
know.
first put pen to paper.
An oldie but a goodie.
Yeah, and some of these concepts that a lot of our community through the podcast we've been talking about these frameworks, but at the time we were talking about some information that was new in the marketplace, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, true. I mean, there's been a lot of stock selling that's been going on forever and a day, right? In terms of,
No, but in terms of the framework, in terms of our
oh,
five
totally.
steps,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you were able to do. I mean, let's be honest. It was your driving framework, and what we wanted to try and articulate is, firstly, opportunity and potential. Secondly, how do you turn that opportunity and potential into action? And the third point is review. And so how do you manage that? So there were the sort of broader concepts in terms of how do you keep moving forward. And then you got to these 5 steps, which we can share with you now, right? Clarify, evaluate, plan, implement, and manage. And then we've got some subsets of those particular things. So, I mean, the opportunity and potential is in everyone's household to be able to get to where you want to get to. So we've got to collect the information and analyse it. So same for you. You've got to gather and sort and get that information together. And why are you doing this? What are your goals?
yeah.
So once we clarify those goals, you're in a far better position to be able to assess and evaluate. So, I mean, you've got a great story about, going to the docks. And
Yeah, well, it's a really good way to think about this, isn't it? Because you talked about the 5 steps to clarify, evaluate, plan, implement, and manage. What I want to say on that is part of our workshopping is you were very firm on the evaluate stage, because at first I'm thinking, is it 4? Do you go clarify, then you got to do the plan, and you were like, no, the evaluation requires the diagnosis, it requires the slow thinking, it requires the merging of the practical experience, the technical experience. Sometimes just being in the industry for so long gets you a bit of a sense of what's appropriate for people. So it's kind of the marinade step, isn't it, Ben? You put the meat in the marinade and you leave it there for a bit so you get a better result.
Yeah, but between step 2 and step 3 is effectively where the problem solving is occurring, right? So where the solution is for what you're trying to do and your investment strategy, and potentially, really starting to get really clear about your priorities in life, your big rocks in the jar and those types of things. So that's a big component of then seeing how people have that potential, and that sits really, really nicely in regards to how we were sort of putting this framework together.
So now, folks, if you've got a copy of the book, you can play along at home. You can open the chapter. We are not going to treat this like an audio book. We're not going to read it word for word. We are just going to talk about the highlights and some stories and some anecdotes around it. So if you do have your copy, you want to play along at home, do that. If you don't have a copy, we're going to put a link up shortly where you can go and get a free copy. Basically, Ben and I have gone and bought a number of copies from our publisher so that we can get this into your hands if you're interested in investing in property or you're interested in self-funding your retirement. So if you want to get access to that, go to the link, thearmchairguide.com.au, and we will give you a book, won't we, Ben? But all we ask for is that you pay for it to be shipped to your place. You just tell us where to ship it and we'll send it. You give us the postage and handling and we'll send it off to you because we bought a copy for you.
Yeah, so there it is up on your screen there, thearmchairguide.com.au. That's that's how you
well
get
done, Ben. Did you do that?
No, let's be honest.
Stiggy did it.
No, that Stiggy did it from behind the scenes over there. So good on her.
So, folks.
So we've also got another little freebie if you stick around too, just for the record.
We're going to go through that. So there's another opportunity. So we're trying to give out some opportunity here. But the 5 steps is best. We think it's best showcased if you think about going to the doctor. You were talking about that before. So first of all, if you walk into a doctor's office, what do you call it, Ben? A doctor's suite, a doctor's room. The first thing they're going to do, if they're any good at their craft, keep going. If they're any good at their craft, they're going to ask you some questions, Ben. Ben, what's going on? What symptoms have you got? Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Croaky throat, a little bit of coughing, fever.
All right. So that's step 1. I've clarified. Step 2 is I'm going to use the evaluation, the marinade. I've spent many, many years doing medicine at uni. I've gone through all the practical application at the beginning. Then I've actually gone through and done this for a number of years. So I'm using my experience in step number 2 is the evaluation. And then step number 3 is I'm going to give you a plan, Ben. So based on that croaky throat, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. 1, stop drinking red wine. 2, cut back on the chocolates with the almonds because we know that you love your chocolates with the almonds.
That's it.
We want you to eat a few more salads. We want you to take a walk around the block and we want you to take this prescription. That's the plan, Ben, as you walk out of the doctor's surgery. There we go, surgery.
Yeah.
And then as you're armed with that plan, Ben, what do you got to do? You got to go home and you've got to implement it, which is step 4.
Yeah.
And then typically what do you do with the doctor? You make an appointment to go and see them 7 to 10 days later. And then they say, what do they say, Ben? They say, did you implement our plan?
Progress. How are we measuring that progress? Have you managed the program of the drug taking or whatever that is, the exercise or whatever the plan was? Did you implement that correctly?
Scaling back the chocolate, scaling back the red wine.
Have you? Yes, all of the above. All of the above. That's exactly what happens. So
and at the managed stage, they go back to step 1, Ben. They clarify a bit further and work out if we need to go through. So that is essentially what a doctor does. And so we're suggesting that a property, if you're talking to someone who's a professional, they should be going through that process, folks, to help you better understand your situation so that you can come to an outcome. So let's dive in a little bit, Ben. But
I reckon that was a nice segue to the how you pay. And, like in terms of, so you were talking about, well, is everyone a doctor in the property investment space, Bryce? Has everyone got qualifications? Is everyone working in your best interest? Because we know here, we've definitely got a bias towards property. We're really clear on that. If you ask us what is the best investment opportunity, it's like asking a barber whether you need a haircut. The answer is there's always, there's better barbers than others, right? There's better doctors than others. So why don't you take us through that strategy, Bryce? Because I do like that strategy.
Thanks for the layup. But so what you're trying to say is who are the industry players? And typically what we need to be looking for in terms of advice is working out where the person who's giving the information gets paid. Because there's really 2 distinct, see if we can make that a bit clearer. There's a quadrant, Ben, and there's a distinct quadrant that you can see on the image there. On the left-hand side of the quadrant, the person who's giving the information gets paid by the person who's selling the property, Ben.
Selling the
selling,
property.
which is fine. Ben, if you put your hand up and say, I'm a salesperson and I'm earning an income from someone who's selling something, that is just a noble profession. That is fine. You just got to declare that,
Correct.
Ben.
Correct.
And then on the right-hand side of the quadrant, Ben, for those playing along at home watching on Facebook, on the right-hand side is the person who's actually being paid by the purchaser. And so ultimately, that is one of the frameworks that we need to be able to work out to understand the industry plays, Ben. Am I being paid by the seller? Am I being paid by the buyer? Because once you understand that line in the sand, well, then it's clear to understand where the advice comes from. Because the person who gets paid from the seller, the first person, on established property is a real estate agent, Ben.
They work for the vendor, don't they, Bryce?
They do, excuse me there. And the second person on working for the seller is if it's brand new, it's usually a project marketer, Ben. Now, we talk about spruikers a bit later on, but that's potentially where they come. Whereas on the right-hand side, the opposite of a real estate agent is a buyer's agent. Excuse me. So a buyer's agent.
Let me know if I need to kick in there, mate, if I need to help you out whilst you have a cough. I'm here.
Well, there's nothing worse than a tickle in the throat when you're going live, is there? So the buyer's agent with the real estate, on the opposite of the real estate agent, and then you've got a property investment advisor. So maybe you might be able to distinguish between the two sides, Ben.
Well, I think if we play on the other side, the buyer's agent usually gets paid a fee, and in some cases that fee is a percentage, which is, like you don't necessarily want an incentive to pay more, and the buyer's agent getting a bit more, or a flat fee is just really clear in terms of what that cost is going to be. And then you've got the property investment advisor. Now, the property investment advisor, from my point of view, also receives a professional fee. They should have a qualification. They should be qualified at the work that they're doing. So not just someone who wears a suit and turns up and says, I know real estate. And ultimately, that's the juxtaposition between what we see as marketeers who are selling from a stock list, and they're saying their service is completely free, but that's because they're getting paid by the developer. So you then want to know, well, is this the best property I could buy for my money if I'm trying to buy it for investment purposes? So whereas an independent, staunchly independent property investment advisor who only gets paid by you as the client, you'd like to think that they've got your best interests at heart. And if they ever take a clip on both sides of the fence, there's a complete conflict of interest. That does happen in our industry, and that's disappointing. And I think it absolutely needs to be completely removed, and that's why we're passionate about regulation coming into the property investment space. That's a story for another day, but that's ultimately how it works. So if you know who you want to be working with and how often that they do what they do and how long they've been doing it for, you'll get the best result with those experienced advisors.
So we go through all that in chapter 3 here, Ben. We talk about what the real estate agents do, the project marketers, but ultimately what we want to do is be able to help people better understand where they should be getting their information from. Because if they can understand that fundamental concept of where the advisor is getting paid, then they just have an awareness bet around where the agenda is for the information that we're getting. Now, within the project marketer space, we've talked about this a fair bit on our podcast, that where we talked before, where you've got someone who is a salesperson and they are not masquerading as being anything other than a salesperson, that is fine. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have someone who's giving advice and they're not receiving anything from the product that they're giving advice about. It's just fee for service. It's this murky stuff in the middle, isn't it, Ben, where the spruiker has emerged, because unlike the financial planning industry where it's heavily regulated, you've got an approved product list, you have to actually recommend products that are only on the approved product list. You saw it in your position as chair of PIPA, Ben. And you saw the dark side and the bright side.
Yeah.
But typically in the property industry, unfortunately, all you need is a haircut and a suit to get involved, because the barrier to entry is low. Yeah.
I think the other part here is sometimes you'll get a professional introduction from a financial planner or an accountant to a property investment advisor, but ultimately that accountant or that financial planner could be getting a kickback. That should be disclosed, but in a lot of cases it may not be disclosed. And the same sort of rules apply potentially when you go to a real estate opening, and ultimately the real estate agent saying, oh, you need to use, broker Bob over here. That's potentially also because broker Bob's going to give the agent a bit of a kickback as well. So it's really important just to ask the right questions. How are you paid? Is anyone else receiving any money as part of this transaction? And if they are, you need to be informed about that in terms of you make your judgment. Do you still think it's the right decision to take? Because a lot of the time, a lot of this money is under the table and it's hidden away from you, and we don't think that's right. So that's why we took a section of the book to talk about this so you can be informed. Because there's a lot of people who won't be making any money out of residential property over the last couple of years, and potentially for the next couple if they've bought the wrong asset in the wrong location. So it's really important to understand that, and we'll get into the fundamentals in the other chapters, in the chapters further into the book, where we do talk about what are those fundamental drivers. But right now, it's about understanding the 5 steps that you take from starting, and then also, exploring those industry players so you can get a good sense of, all right, there's a high value transaction about to go on here. How does it all work? And we're sort of sharing that with you right now.
So there you go, folks. That's the industry players. Ben talked about flat fee versus percentage of purchase price. We're proponents of the flat fee as a buyer's agent, and that could be another Facebook Live as to why that is, Ben. But so really, what we've gone from clarify, which was get an understanding of who you are, and that can be for some people, Ben. If you go to the previous chapter, we talked about time and target. Some people may have more time or a bigger target or whatever. So it's about getting an understanding of what it is that you specifically want in that clarify. So then the evaluate stage, you can have something that's not a cookie cutter one size fits all. Now, as part of the step that we did there in the evaluation, we went into a little bit of detail, Ben, around the money smarts. Now, what's interesting is this book here we wrote before we wrote Make Money Simple Again, which is all about our Money Smarts program.
Correct.
But since we've released both books, 2 things. One, they're evergreen. They work in any market at any time. But 2, the other one is really the prequel, because it precedes this one, because it's about building that foundation so that you can purchase. But in this chapter here, we go into a little bit of detail. It's at the 30,000 foot level, Ben, so that people can get a better understanding on how to manage their money. So here on page number 62, you get a bit of a sense of what the basic banking structure looks like. But instead of sort of going into depth there, we might just let folks know who are listening to this that they can also get a copy of our first book if they go to makemoneysimpleagain.com.
Oh, Make Money Simple Again. That's the other book. Have you got the other book handy there, Bryce?
Now, no. I didn't put the other one handy. Do you have it there, Ben?
I just happened to have a copy handed to me just then. That's the second book. Where would we be without the Stig, seriously? That's how you organise your money. What does it say there? A no BS money management system that works. It is a best-selling book. We've sold thousands and thousands of copies of that book as well. But the point, I just want to highlight a couple of critical points, right?
Go on,
in terms of the money management system is critical to trapping surplus. So, and the 5-step process only works if you've got money to play with. So if you don't have money to play with, to invest, if you can't trap that surplus, in other words, if you can't organise your money, control your money, trap that surplus, chances are you're going to be working for a very, very long time, and you won't necessarily have that financial transformation, which is what we're passionate about, to find financial peace. So we've with COVID-19 and everything going on, we've decided that this book here, see how good I am at camera, give it away. Like we've got enough, we've sold enough. So, there's over 9,000 people have downloaded a copy of this book, Bryce. So we're coming up to 10,000 downloads. So we're giving it away. And then there's also a free platform in which people can set up on, because that's how passionate we are about people who need to organise their money correctly. And then once they do, they should feel empowered about the next step in that journey.
Well, we're giving everyone the opportunity for success, aren't we, Ben? Because we're making the instruction manual for free, and we're giving them a platform that implements all of the stuff in the book for free as well. So, and of course, if you want to get this book, you can get that for free as well. So that was in the evaluate section, Ben, which was around money management.
Question without notice: what does SMART stand for, Bryce? Money Smarts. What's the acronym there? Tell me. Talk to me.
strategy,
Yes.
mindsets,
Yes.
application,
Yes.
resources,
Yes.
timeline,
Yes.
and surplus. You're trying to trip me up, weren't you?
I was. Damn it. Good, nice work. Well done. You
What is
passed.
it backwards, Ben? Go.
No.
So
Just means organise and thrive with your money.
So we do say that in the book. So that's step 2. Step 3, Ben, is around the planning. Now, you've been the Property Investment Advisor of the Year a couple of years in a row, as well as our business being the Property Investment Advisory of the Year. So what do you think are the headlines for the planning, Ben, that's really, really critical for people to keep in mind as step 3 of our 5 essential steps?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts of planning, and that is strategy and tactics. So the tactics piece comes down to how you line the ducks up, and the strategy piece is how you make sure you've got the cash flows to make that happen. So, it is tactical, especially if you're building a long-term plan. So the strategy in organising that cash flow, getting the lending, making sure you're buying in the right location, and implementing on that is how you're going to get that plan piece to play out for you. So it's incredibly powerful to make the invisible visible. And you can do that with a proper plan. You can start to think about, well, at this point, my wealth is going to be this, my cash flow surplus is going to be this. Some money's going to turn on and off. You might have kids, you might have other commitments in the future. So that's what planning's all about. It's about organising those big rocks and then basically making sure that we've got the cash flows to get you through it.
At the back of the book, Ben, we've got case studies on how you implement what you just talked about there around strategy and tactics. So if people want to get access and have a look at those, there's quite a few different scenarios that we've done in that so that people can get a sense of, we've put what our assumptions are and the like. So there's a fair bit of IP in that. So if you want to check that out on page 215, you can get access to that. So step 1, Ben, is clarify. Step 2 is evaluate. Step 3 is plan, which you just talked about. Step 4 is the implementation, which we jumped to earlier.
Well, over to you, mate. As a buyer's agent, as one of Australia's buyers board in every state and territory in Australia, tell us about what you need to do when you're implementing.
Thank you for that. Every state and territory, with the exception of the Northern Territory, Ben.
Okay.
That's the only one I haven't done. But I've been in there as part of the show. So really, the implementation, as we said before, Ben, is not just about searching. Is not researching. Online portals is not what it takes. There is an art and a science. We talk about the science around suburb selection. We talk about the science around what we're looking for in a particular asset. But there's also a bit of art to it as well, but understanding around the status test and being aware of, some things are black and white, but there's a bit of grey as well, Ben, in terms of looking for. So that takes a bit of time, but you need to understand that it's an essential need. Therefore, there is an opportunity to exploit some of the inefficiencies, and then you purchase. And then
we talk about that human interest and human behaviour piece as part of that story. So you're absolutely right. I mean, ultimately, 70% of the property market price is owner-occupiers. They're price makers. Investors should be smart enough to be price takers, not the other way around.
Yeah, don't swim upstream, folks. Swim downstream. If the owner-occupiers are driving the market, just buy assets that they like. Don't buy assets that investors like.
They buy with their hearts, not their heads. So that's a good strategy.
Hearts, not their calculators, Ben. And then the last one, step 5, is manage. And that often gets missed because people are spending a lot of, burning a lot of fuel to get the plane to take off. But when it levels off, you need to be tweaking, you need to be fine-tuning, you need to be refining. You need to. It only feels like yesterday, Ben, but a year and a half, 2 years ago, when APRA dropped a handbrake on lending, that requires a bit of tweaking. Your strategy may have looked in this direction, and then the challenges around getting finance might mean you need to pivot and do a little tweak over here, or put back a property, or bring a property forward, or if you're going to take a sabbatical. So there's little nuances that go along the way. So I think a rocket, Ben, I might butcher this a little bit, but the general gist is a rocket on the way to its destination is usually on track only about 3% of the time. And for the remaining 9%, there's 97%, there's always these subtle adjustments to make sure that it's back on track. And essentially, if you think of it like that, that's what the manager's doing. It's just making those little subtle adjustments over time to flex with your circumstances so that you still arrive at the destination.
Yeah, so we call that manage, and if you were breaking that down into sub-context, we talk about that being measuring and monitoring. So what Bryce is talking about is you measure, measure, tweak, and those types of things. So if you're doing those types of steps, chances are you're going to end up very, very close to your destination, if not right on the money when it comes to your plans around investing in property.
There you have it, folks. The 5 essential steps when building a property portfolio. It's really important. The way to sum that up, Ben, is very, very simple. Property investing is a process, not an event. That process is a 5-step process. You need to do step 1 before 3. Mm-hmm. You need to do 2 before 4. You need to do 3 before 4 and 5. It's just really, really straightforward and really, really simple. So hopefully that's helped, folks, to give you a bit of an idea on just for the record, because of this book and because we've sold over 20,000 copies, the amount of people that come into our business, quite often, Ben, I'd say a very, very high percentage of the people that come and see us ask how to build a portfolio to retire in 2,000 a week. So we're not talking theory. We're actually talking practical stuff that we get to see on the ground each and every day, not only in the building of the plan, but the implementing of it in terms of buying the assets. So we're really keen to say that we consider ourselves subject matter experts. We don't consider ourselves gurus who are talking about concepts that we've never done ourselves. Not only have we implemented it in our own personal portfolios, but we've implemented it in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients' portfolios as well. So, folks, go on, Ben.
What does Molly Meldrum say? Do yourselves a favour. Do yourselves a favour and grab the book.
Well, you just knocked out the Gen Ys, Ben, because I don't know who Meldrum is. But, yeah, folks, if you want to get access to that again, we might see if Stiggy can help us and put the link back up. But
the link has been up all this time, Bryce. I'm lucky enough to see it on the screen. All this stuff happening around me. It's great. All I've got to do is concentrate on talking. It's awesome.
We surround ourselves with Gen Y, so it happens, don't we, Ben? So,
thanks, Stiggy.
So there you go. So there you go, folks. We've been through 3 chapters now. Chapter 1 was building the knowledge base. Chapter 2 was all about the 4 foundational levers, Ben, in terms of setting yourself up for success in terms of the psychology. The 3rd chapter that we've just been through, folks, is the 5 essential steps. We want you to play along. We're going to read out each and every chapter, Ben, over the next coming weeks. We're also going to talk about our 18 strategies, Ben, which we actually haven't even talked about these 18 strategies on the podcast. So this will be the first time. So you should check this out as we get to that later on in the chapters. So, Ben, it's been a fun break a bit of ISO here.
30 minutes goes pretty quick when you're talking the stuff you love to talk about.
Yeah, very, very true. So there you go, folks. Hopefully, if you're enjoying this, if you could leave a comment below, maybe tag one of your friends who you think might be interested in listening to this as well. That would be super. And, of course, Ben and I have a podcast where we try and deliver as much gold as we can, Ben, giving the insider's guide on property finance and money management. We do that each and every Thursday at 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to check that out, go to thepropertycouch.com.au.